Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the NRG series Pioneer 5K. On day 2 here, we're going to jump into round 2 very shortly, but my name is Anurag Das, and I'm joined here with Devin O'Donnell, the legendary Doomwake. Welcome, Devin. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to watch some Pioneer content. I know Dominaria United has made a massive impact in the format, and I'm really excited to see what kind of sweet strategies we got cooked up for us
Yeah,
today.
for sure. I think today's event is going to be very, very important because it's going to be one of the breakout events where Dominaria is now legal in Pioneer. And, around the corner, we do have a very important coming up for just all of Magic in general. It is DreamHack Atlanta. That is the or North America's, or I believe, first RC regional championship. So that means slots for Worlds, slots for the Pro Tour. And that is a Pioneer-based format. So, if you're watching today, congratulations. You are in the right place to get, the first glimpse of what, DMU Pioneer looks like. I mean, I'm sure people have been playing it for weeks now, and a lot of the developments have started coming to fruition. But, that's what I want to ask you first is, Devin, you've been playing a lot of Pioneer lately. What are your thoughts on Dominaria United? What do you think we should be expecting to see today?
So the set has definitely made a massive impact in the format. Maybe not quite the same cards that are impactful in Modern. Like Leyline Binding is a great example, probably the best one for Modern, but not quite as good in Pioneer because there's no fetch lands. The cards that we're looking for, Liliana the Veil in the Rakdos mid-range deck, and the Greasefang deck's got a massive upgrade with Liliana as well. Mono Green Devotion still at the top of the format. Those are probably, I would say, the three big decks, as it were. I was looking through some of the deck list, and those seem to be the ones that popped out the most. Tribal decks got a massive upgrade. They all got a lord, so goblins, elves, and merfolk potentially maybe something that we're looking out for. Mono white humans, not necessarily got anything from Dominaria, but just a very solid aggressive strategy. And yeah, that seems to be a Phoenix. There's been a little bit of a downtick in Phoenix lately because more people are moving towards like main deck licensed tourists and things of that nature, but still people playing it. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're looking for today.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a card around the block that has been a name that I've heard. Originally, I looked at this card and I was like, there's no way this card is really playable in any format. And then suddenly, oh no, there's like a Phyrexian Praetor at 4 mana, Sheoldred. How do you feel about that card in Pioneer?
It's good. I think maybe the hype is a little bit overblown because at the end of the day, it is still just a 4 mana creature. It is nice that it dodges a lot. Well, not dodges, but specifically one of the more common played removal spells in the mirror match is Dreadbore, and it's not always easy to get some to have like a permanent lying around for the Revolt Trigger and Fatal Push. So even if there's a Dreadbore, you still get something out of the way. The thing that Sheoldred, and I think part of the reason is we talked about why Phoenix has been kind of pushed out of the format, is Sheoldred is very, very punishing against blue decks that have a lot of cantrips like Consider and Opt and Treasure Cruise. So those, if you can just, say, Thoughtseize their Lightning Axe and then slam a Sheoldred, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to kind of dig their way out of it if they don't already have a second copy available. So I think it is a good card, just maybe not as quite as good as people think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at some of the deck lists that we have going on here for our first feature match in Pioneer. The matchup is going to be Abzan Greasefang against Golgari Devotion. And I'm kind of interested in the thoughts here. So you mentioned Abzan Greasefang as one of the decks that has gotten a boost thanks to the new printing of Liliana. Now talk to me about what this deck is trying to do and how Dominaria United has facilitated this, because I can guess Liliana is a very powerful card. What's it got?
Specifically, just being more ways to discard Parhelion from your hand. And, Greasefang is trying to set up Parhelion in the graveyard and then cast the card Greasefang to reanimate the Parhelion. So just having more ways to put that into the graveyard, which you didn't necessarily have enough ways before, is something that the deck really, really wanted to have access to, along with just being a good mid-range card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this deck is one of the decks, like you mentioned, that we've been seeing a lot of lately in Pioneer, as the players are now ready and starting here. On the other side, we have Golgari Devotion, which is not your usual take on, I'm used to mono green Devotion. This is definitely a spin on the situation here. What does black add to this deck?
So if we take a look at the deck list, we got a couple of Vraska Golgari Queens. Now, the cool thing about this Golgari Devotion deck is there's actually another infinite combo. I know that the regular Devotion decks already have infinite combos, but this deck can loop Vraska Golgari Queen, and then you can Karn for an Ugin's Nexus out of the sideboard. So what Ugin's Nexus does, I believe the exact text is when it dies, I believe you exile, then you can take an extra turn. Yeah, put into a graveyard instead of exile and take an extra turn. So basically, you can Vraska, blow up your own Ugin's Nexus, then you can Karn to get the Ugin's Nexus back and kind of just take a bunch of turns that way. I believe is, or no, you sacrifice it to the Vraska, not blow it up, but sacrifice the next to the Vraska, and then you can Karn -4 it again, so on and so forth, and just kind of take a bunch of turns in a row. So that's mostly what the black adds, along with some interaction like Fatal Push, I believe, in the sideboard as well.
Okay, but otherwise the deck looks mostly stock here as you're playing, the primary core. You can even see it right now in play. Turn 1 Elf, turn 2 3-mana Planeswalker Kiora, the Behemoth Reckoner, now in play here. And this is a piece of one of very many. I remember when first I was told Kiora's got an infinite combo with Karn, and what is it with the Pestilent Cauldron or Restorative Burst rather, to combo infinitely with your multitude of Planeswalkers here. And so this is somewhat of an aggressive start, but this is like also somewhat of a just this is what these devotions deck do, the turn 1 ramp, and then no play on turn 3 is interesting.
Yeah, so you see no payoff from Drew here, because if Drew had anything, a Cavalier, an Old Growth Troll, they would have cast it, given that they, with the Kiora would have had access to 5 mana. So likely just kept a hand that was mostly, I'm guessing, mana and a Storm the Festival, because didn't have access to 6 mana this turn, will have access to 6 mana next turn. So probably just, no Cavs, no Trolls, and 1 or 2 copies of Storm potentially.
All right, well that looks like a Grisly Salvage on the end
Storm in
step.
the hand.
Yeah, and that is going to untap after that. Let's see here. How is the graveyard looking right now? I do believe I see a copy of Parhelion in the graveyard. So this is a matchup where how do you feel about just jamming a Greasefang in right now?
Oh yeah, 100%. The mono green deck, so they have a couple of, sometimes 1 or 2 Boseijus, but even if your Parhelion gets Boseiju, you don't really care that much because you can just run it back the next turn. The green deck doesn't have any interaction to ways to remove creatures from the battlefield. So if you go Greasefang for Parhelion, and then even if they have Boseiju, you can just run it back next turn. So I would 100% just jam. So yeah, it looks like Harrison did not have the Greasefang.
Okay, yeah, and so that makes sense here. Witherbloom Command going to deny a little bit of mana here, picking off the Llanowar Elves, and now we'll see what happens on the upcoming turn here for Drew, because let's see, like realistically speaking, last turn there was no 4-mana play, so this turn maybe we can just expect a rinse and repeat here as,
Right, and yet Harrison recognized didn't have a troll, didn't have a Cav, so killing that Llanowar Elf likely means that Drew is also going to get time walked again. So
right.
Yeah, and obviously the most important card in this matchup is Karn the Great Creator. It's usually I've played this matchup quite a few times from both sides, and typically it's just a race as to can I Parhelion before they Karn. But you'll notice, Harrison doesn't have Greasefang and Drew doesn't have Karn, so it's kind of we're just kind of in the waiting room, and somebody just trying to find.
I'm looking at the script right now, and I'm just like, what is going on? This is not how the doctor ordered it up. So what? But that makes sense. Karn does give you access to something like Tormod's script, which is pretty powerful, and just I mean, honestly, the way I look at these mono green decks, or these devotion decks rather, is that Karn has almost the entirety of the sideboard devoted to the card. So having those options accessible, very important, regardless of what matchup you're playing, but especially so in this one.
Yeah, and Karn also just shutting down the ability to crew vehicles. You could just Karn uptick, and they can never crew their Parhelion. So, and you see a Thoughtseize from Harrison last turn, taking that Storm the Festival, as we alluded to. No other payoff. So, Drew's kind of all just really just in pure top deck mode at this point, just looking for a troll or a Cav to get the juices flowing, so that Nykthos can be untapped with the Cure, and then maybe flashback the Storm and go from there. So.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question here. I want you to evaluate. Oh, and Satyr Wayfinder is the play here. There is one Greasefang being mulligan. Oh, and this is a new card, right? Can't Stay Away?
I think that's from Innistrad Midnight
Oh,
Hunt. I don't think it's a new card.
Yeah, it's new to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
that's
right. Yeah, it's another way this deck has. So normally when you're milling the Greasefang over with Satyr Wayfinder and Grisly Salvage, you don't really want that to happen with Wayfinder. But when you have something like Can't Stay Away, you can just put the Greasefang in the graveyard, get it back, and kind of do the whole shebang that way. So.
Yeah, and so this to me just sort of begs the question, and I'll let you answer, is how do you feel about the keep that Drew had here? The curve was pretty powerful, turn 1 mana dork, turn 2 a 3-mana planeswalker. Is this the kind of hand that a deck like Devotion can keep? Like, for example, let's say like we're talking about Tron, right? You don't keep hands that don't have turn 3 Tron on 7. You mulligan. Would you have mulligan this start, gone for something else?
So Drew kept what Elf, Storm, Kiora, and lands with a Nykthos. I think you have to keep those hands.
Okay.
Maybe if the hand didn't have a Nykthos, I think maybe you could consider mulliganing. But just having Nykthos plus Kiora plus Elf and one payoff, you can't really ask for a ton more than that from your ramp deck. You just kind of have to keep and shrug.
Yeah, and the Parhelion having haste here is actually quite incredible. We're going to see, yeah, that is the Greasefang combo all wrapped up there. Game one going to be taken down by the artifact, the vehicle combo there. I love to see angels in play. I mean, as an ex Whoa, that was close. I almost did that. As a Miracles player, nothing gets me going like the 4/4s, and it just makes an insurmountable board state from that position. You know, it's I mean, from that, like, there's not enough mana set up there, not enough board presence. The Nykthos isn't really active, so I do appreciate that concession. I think that is a smart move in order to save time, mental energy for the post board games. Let's take a look at some of the deck lists here. Let's see what it's sideboard options for the Golgari Devotion list. Is there anything here that you're interested from? Notably, the black cards in the sideboard are Abrupt Decays and Fatal Push. Otherwise, things look pretty simple. It's pretty stock.
Yeah, Drew's basically got a 4-card sideboard. You're never going to bring in the card targets, so we're looking at Abrupt Decay, Fatal Push, which both of those happen to kill a Greasefang. Fatal Push less so because Drew doesn't have a ton of ways to turn on Revolt. So I don't know if you look at Drew's deck list, like really, there's not really much here to turn on Revolt. So I don't really think we even want the Fatal Pushes. Decays are a slam dunk, but I think it's really just Decays.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's super interesting. Nothing like extra copy of Boseiju. There's only one in the main deck, making space for any of your dual lands there: the Blooming Marshes, the Overgrown Tombs, and the Pathways. Okay, that's pretty exciting. What about the other side of the table here? What do we have from the Greasefang side? Anything interesting that you like?
So this looks pretty stock. There's a languish which you don't usually see. Personally, from this side of things, I like cards that interact with Karn. So definitely want the duresses. Those are pretty easy for me. You could consider the Sky Sovereign. So there's a lot of common play patterns where you go Karn down tick. So even if you obviously you wouldn't be able to crew the grease vent, like crew your vehicle with a Karn, but if you get back a Sky Sovereign, you can kill the Karn with the trigger, and then still before attacks, you can crew the vehicle. So I think Sky Sovereign is excellent in this matchup. By bringing those three cards, you could look at some amount of removal spells for Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystics, but I'm generally not the biggest fan of those. I think if I was leaning towards anything, it would be Trophy, because Trophy also kills Karn, and maybe Decays to kill some of the Karn targets. But
Okay, yeah. Any cards here that you might not necessarily like from the Greasefang side? What falls off as you move from game one to game two, from pre to post board?
So I tend to not be a huge fan of Liliana the Veil in this matchup. I think it's pretty slow. And, from the Greasefang side of things, you're just trying to set up as quickly as possible. And Liliana is, a little bit slow in that regard. So I wouldn't mind cutting a couple lilies. And then from there, you pretty much just trim. Like, I think you can trim maybe a Can't Stay Away, because, again, that's more so something that's playing towards a longer game, and you don't want to play a longer game in this matchup. So Liliana's Can't Stay Aways, and then maybe you can trim like a Raffine's Informant or something along those lines.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I might know the answer to this question, and I'll follow up afterwards. But like, what are the key cards that both players are looking for in their opening hands again? I mean, I'm just gonna give a shout out here that maybe the Greasefang deck wants the turn three Greasefang. But on the other side, is there? I mean, you see, here's the thing, right? Like, I asked this question, and I realized that maybe it's not the most interesting question, because these are really both very proactive strategies, and I think that's something we'll see in Pioneer a lot today. Is that the decks are very proactive. Unlike the modern counterpart, where there's a lot more removal spells and you see a lot of planeswalkers generating value over time. These are pretty cutthroat decks that are trying to just win the game, as fast as like turn three, put my Greasefang into play kind of deal. And so, what are your thoughts on the texture of these post board games now that both players are appropriately adjusted for the matchups?
I'll answer that in a second, but just going back on that point, the reason for that is because the threats are a lot better than the answers in Pioneer, and I think it's vice versa in Modern. The answers are a lot better than the threats.
Okay.
But to answer your question, obviously Harrison's looking for some sort of enabler on turn 2 into a Greasefang on turn 3, and Drew's really just looking for mana plus Karn. Karn is the most important card. Now, that being said, I do agree with Drew's hand. This hand is pretty good, although once the Kiora most likely gets Thoughtseize, we don't have a ton of mana. We just kind of got some 4/4s, and the 4/4 plan is not very good against the turn 3 Greasefang. So
Yeah.
I think this keep is fine from Drew, but yeah, this Kiora is almost certainly going to get taken with the Thoughtseize here.
All right, checking up on Vraska Golgari Queen here. The hand has 2 copies of Old Growth Troll and then 1 Overgrown Tomb as well. And so you're saying that the pick here is Kiora. You're just trying to deny mana here. Is there any reason to take maybe the Vraska, for example, or even an Old Growth Troll? I asked. It's interesting because I was asking some friends about like Old Growth Troll. I was reading the text on this card and I was like, this card is actually like kind of terrifying. And then one of my when I was talking about it, my friend just said, yeah, most decks will just try to ignore this card. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely feel like Greasefang falls in that. This deck, like the Abzan deck, falls in that category.
Yes, 100%. Now, yeah, that's the more I think about it, I'm wondering if maybe Drew could have considered mulliganing on 7. But then you're getting into this situation where you mulliganing against the Thoughtseize deck, then it's more, kind of thing. So, but yeah, it's just like the Greasefang deck when it's working on all cylinders, it doesn't really care that much about a couple of 4/4s. Like it can easily outclass that with something like a Parhelion, and even something like even something just like Esika's Chariot can, you can like say Chariot, make a couple tokens, attack with the Chariot, make another token. Maybe they block with the Troll, and then you could trade 2 tokens for the other Troll. So, it's something that the Abzan Greasefang deck doesn't care too much about. Now, that being said, when it doesn't have the Greasefang Parhelion stuff, yeah, 4/4s are going to kill you pretty quickly.
Can you explain to me the value of Raffine's Informant in this deck? I've been looking at this card a lot, and Raffine's Informant, it's 1 and a white for a 2/1. When it ETBs, it connives. Is this just another enabler that you're looking for that adds board presence, or is there something beyond that?
It's mostly because it costs 2 mana. So you're really looking for 2 mana enablers that help you put a Parhelion in the graveyard so you can set up a Greasefang on turn 3. There are, almost certainly, enablers that are a little bit better than the card Informant, but they're most of them, cost, like, you don't see additional copies of Liliana, for example. You would think that, oh, well, you just play 4 Liliana, but that's because of the fact that it costs 3 and you just want that's like your setup turn is turn 2.
Yeah, that's a lean, mean Greasefang machine here. We're gonna see Duress take the Vraska from the hand here, but bad news because double Old Growth Troll swinging in for 8 chump block here with the Informant, and now the board state is not looking good here for Harrison Fang on Abzan Greasefang. Maybe Golgari Good Devotion going to take this one. We're going to go to game 3.
Yeah, looking at Harrison's hand, I think it was 2 Chariots, a Greasefang, a Temple Garden, and an Informant. So you can shock to 3, play the Chariot. You can double block one of the Trolls and still dead to the other one. Yeah, you just couldn't didn't have like a ton of enablers. Like, he drew the Raffine's Informant, Witherbloom Command, but just didn't, obviously just didn't find the Parhelion. So I think we're about to go to game 3.
Okay, yeah. I actually missed that. The literal first word on the text for Old Growth Troll is trample, and I mixed that. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, how much text can you add to a card? But this is what I'm saying. Like, this is actually kind of interesting for me because, like, it's really cool to see that the devotion deck has like these multifaceted plans. The first one is just like what you would normally expect, right? Like you mentioned, Karn is the name of the deck. It's one of the most important cards in the deck. You have a bevy of other planeswalkers to leverage Karn's power. Also, just cards like Kiora, cards like Vraska that are pretty good on themselves. But then this random beatdown plan, because your creatures are quite incredible. Now, obviously, to me, what's interesting is I don't know if we actually saw any sideboard cards on the devotion side of things. So this was just like raw, like solitaire. Like here's a 4/4, here's a 4/4. Make you have it, and it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're stumbling turn 2 4/4, turn 3 4/4 can, that I guess, like you said, that's just a backbreaking plan against a lot of decks. And even against the decks that have a ton of removal, you think something like Rakdos, those 4/4s just replace themselves essentially. Now there are some, you have to look at the database because there are some weird situations where you look at, like I've played the devotion deck a couple of times and there's pathways and there's fast lands. So you can there's actually situations where you go like turn 1 fast land, turn 2 pathway troll, and then you just don't have a forest and play to get it. So you got to watch out for that. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that is, yeah, because then if it dies, you can't enchant a forest, and can be tricky. This is one of the things I love about Pioneer too, is that now in most formats, like in Legacy and Modern specifically, I feel like mana is it's just a bit too free sometimes. And so I love that, Pioneer is a format that has access to like a wide variety of cards, but then deck construction does matter, and those are the things. Let's take a look at the sideboards one more time because I want to see if there are any reevaluations going in from game 3 or going into game 3 rather. Abzan Greasefang does have a more varied sideboard here because we talked about the Karn board, the artifact board from the other side. So any reevaluation after seeing the beatdown plan here from Golgari Devotion?
You could maybe try to talk yourself into like fatal push in the play for Llanowar elves, but when you're on the play, I don't even think I think you're maybe more likely to want that on the draw. But on the play, you're really just trying to have a discard spell on turn 1, an enabler on turn 2, and a Greasefang on turn 3. So fatal push doesn't really kind of fit into that. I guess like if you don't have a discard spell. But yeah, I think I wouldn't bring in the fatal pushes. I'm still really just looking at Duress Trophy, Boat as good cards against Karn, cutting some of the slower cards. Yeah, I don't think too much changes play draw.
Okay, nothing like Languish to bring in here. If I Languish is -4/-4, right? Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Nothing like that, perhaps.
nah, too slow.
Too slow. Okay, cool. All right. So I like your approach to it, and I also like the smiley faces here. This might be a running recurring thing here. But yeah, that does make sense. This is sort of like 2 ships in the night kind of deal. There's maybe like 1 or 2 pieces of interaction, maybe max, but after that, there seems to be a lot of solitaring. So I'm curious to test the consistency of Harrison's deck, because game 1 we had to play a lot of cards in order to get our combo online, and game 2 it just certainly wasn't fast enough. So see how the next game plays out.
Just thinking here. Now, I think I see Greasefang, Parhelion, land 3, and a Thoughtseize. If I'm in Harrison's seat, I'm probably just Thoughtseizing myself here. Like, okay, maybe I didn't see the Parhelion, but I thought I saw
Okay.
Parhelion.
That is a cool line, though, and I really do love the put them to the test, make them have it sort of mentality here.
Right, and the thing is, if you cast Salvage, now obviously hits the Parhelion, you risk not hitting the Parhelion, right? Whereas if you just have it rolled up, you know that the green deck doesn't have interaction. Doesn't really matter here. Did hit the Parhelion, so no harm, no foul. But yeah, typically that's something that I think a lot of people kind of overlook a little bit in this deck, is just the Thoughtseize yourself line, especially when you're playing against Modern Green, your opponent doesn't have meaningful interaction on turn 3. So
Yeah, looks like you were right on the Skyship Sovereign call, boarding that in here against the Devotion deck. So scoreboard +1 here. Witherbloom Command going to take care of this Llanowar Elves, mill a couple more cards. Maybe we don't have the Greasefang setup, or maybe we want to wait until turn 4 to combo Thoughtseize and Greasefang together.
yeah, I think we just don't have the Greasefang. I think
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense, I think, because it would be so good here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I might have misjudged the hand there, but the command does buy us the turn for and the Thoughtseize too. So we're gonna be able to pick apart Drew's hand pretty well here. Gonna try and keep Drew off Karn, which doesn't even have, but looks like we got Cariatid, Kiora, Storm, couple lands. Probably just want to take the. It's awkward because if you take the Kiora, then we go Cariatid, then land 4. Nykthos would be 4. We'd still have enough to Storm, so I think you maybe just have to take the Storm. But then if you take the Storm, then you could just go Kiora, Cariatid, untap the Nykthos, be 5 Devotion, -2 is 3, +5 is 8. Yeah, I think you're kind of in a rough spot either way. So maybe you just take the Kiora, and maybe you can hope to draw the discard spell for the Storm.
Yeah.
Kind of close.
Yeah, definitely. I would pause on this situation too, and I'm also really bad at counting, so this would take me a lot of time. But don't tell Joe I said that, because I know he's going to remember and bring this up later. In fact, I think he's taking a nap, so I'm clear to be vulnerable. No, but yeah, that is definitely interesting. I mean, we saw what happened in game 1 too, where like when you took the when the Devotion deck didn't have pressure in play to really attack the life total, or just like threaten to end the game, that's when the Greasefang deck was like able to take a quick breath and relax and actually get more time to set up the combo. Now in game 2, the exact opposite happened. It was just brutal. It was a beatdown. Here it's happening again. Harrison going down to 12 here. So I wonder if this is like the situation of, do you take the setup or do you take the payoff? And in this situation, it looks like Kiora is taken here, which is what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, it does make a little bit of sense, because now you're going to see Drew the Oath, which is actually kind of huge, because now you can go Oath, play land, play Sylvan Caryatid, and then you have 5 Devotion, which would be 2, 5. Yeah, so you have more than enough to cast a Storm next turn. So that was a pretty good pickup there for Drew. But I mean, honestly, we're really just a Greasefang away from just kind of just taking over the game here. See if we can find it. Oh, that's the other half of the combo.
Yeah. Not exactly. Again, the script, like I think. Okay, so I figured it out. All right, the script is actually reversed. Harrison is sticking to the script, but Drew is not. This is like I don't know if you remember if you've ever watched like Community, but there's that one episode where like they roll the dice and they go into like a bunch of different dimensions, and I just remember like at the end, Donald Glover comes with a like a pizza box and the whole apartment is on fire. That's exactly where I envisioned this game going.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
All
I
right.
was expecting the Greasefang to get milled off the Wayfinder because that's that's part of the script, I would assume.
Yeah, right. Just like da 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 da, like clown noises or whatever. All right. So things are now starting to get a little bit scary here. I mean, okay, at what point do you think finding Greasefang is like not good enough? Because if Karn comes into play, right, like Tormod's script in play, and
Yeah,
then that's gonna be real bad. Like this next turn might just be the last turn. Maybe this was the turn where like you have to draw the Greasefang. I don't know. It's looking really, really, really tough.
we'll have to see what comes off this Storm the Festival. Hypothetically, there could just be I've certainly whiffed off Storm before, but yeah, it really all comes down to the Storm the Festival. If it's anything involving a Karn or something like that, then that is even with something like an Assassin's Trophy, it's you don't have the trophy in hand, so you have to like find the trophy, then find the Grease Fang. If a Karn gets hit off this Storm, I think we're probably done.
Yeah, because I mean, already the pressure from the old growth troll adding up here. You have a 1/1 to block, but again, keyword trample, powerful stuff. And
All
yep,
right,
there it
spin
is.
the wheel. Doing a
Ooh,
little gamba. Chat loves
that is
gamba.
good wheel.
What do we
I
got?
don't
We
see
got. I
Karn,
think
but
it
I do
was.
see a couple other cards there. I see like a Vraska, Kiora, and then was there another old growth troll?
Okay, I don't believe the Druze played a land, so this is actually kind of massive because Kiora can untap the Nykthos. Drew can play land from hand and then activate the Nykthos again. Right, so
I was
this
gonna
is
say what
three,
if
four, five, six. We have 9 devotion. We're actually still short of flashing back the storms. We only have not, right, 1, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, only 9 devotions. So, oh, chat's saying okay. He did play the Nykthos. My bad. Okay, right, because he played the Pathway last turn. So yeah, land has already been played.
yeah. I think I saw a backup copy of Nykthos in the hand too. So next turn for sure we might be able to do everything. I mean, yeah, definitely next turn for sure we can do everything. So this is quite incredible.
Next
Now I'm
turn,
gonna ask the question: is Greasefang even enough here?
Uh, probably not. The thing about Greasefang is, yeah, I guess you can maybe try to fight over the Kiora. This Boseiju would be pretty good. From Harrison's perspective, it looks good, but we both know that Drew has a second Nykthos in hand. So, but yeah, I mean, with Drew at 20, Greasefang, well, a little late to the party. There it is, but it's only what 13 damage. So I guess you can kill Kiora, but then yeah, the Nykthos is just going to allow the storm. I mean, hypothetically, if Drew draws a land for turn and then flashes back the Storm of the Festival and hits maybe 5 lands off the Storm of the Festival, then maybe that probably will be enough. But I guess that's just going to come down to the second storm.
I said it to Joe about me getting onto the Pro Tour. I'll say it to you. So you're saying there's a chance. Okay.
There's always a chance.
All right. So Greasefang going to crew the Parhelion here. Drew pretty confident with that thumbs up. It's okay.
Yeah, Drew knows he's sitting pretty with the second Nykthos in hand. So
On a scale of like 1 to 10, 10 being the most consistent deck you've ever played, 1 being like, I don't know, like really bad. Where would you say Greasefang is on the scale of consistency? How often do you I mean, okay, against you probably a 10, but against like the average player, like, yeah, I see that. Yeah. How consistent would you say it is?
somewhere between like a 7 and an 8, probably.
Okay.
It's tough because there's a decent number of things that have to go right. Like you need to have an enabler. Your enabler has to hit pretty well, and also the mana base is actually kind of sketchy. Most mana bases, and I'll see if I can take a look at Harrison's list, but most mana bases only have between 9 and 10 white sources, and needing a white source on turn 3 with only 9 to 10 can be a little sketchy sometimes. So I would say it's probably somewhere between 7 and 8 for me.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of mana being added here off of the Nykthos. So what is the follow-up play? We're just flashing back the festivals here? No, we're playing the Cavalier. Okay.
Yeah, we should have enough. Do we have enough to Cav first? Well, hit a second Nick though, so I guess we do. If we didn't, we definitely do now. So 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. We used 5 for the cav, 4 floating, minus 2 is 2, plus 3, 6, 9, 12. So it should be 14 mana, I think. And then
Yes, I
Storm should be
trust
4
you.
floating.
I said earlier that, like, you know, I look, a Pioneer is a super sweet format, and I was doing my homework this week, but really, like, you are my cheat sheet. So when you were doing all of these, like, you know, like when you see like players just like tap the table in front of them as they're doing calculations, so like, oh, this that, and you're just like you know, looking on the other side, like, oh, I'm that dead. Well, that's where you come in, and you're just like, yeah, this is what they're actually thinking when they do that.
Yeah, I've played a lot of this devotion deck, and you're looking at Drew's sideboard there. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that, but you saw a Wolfwillow Haven cut, so definitely did bring in those abrupt decays. Just, you know, looks like maybe trimmed on some of the extra ramp. Now I don't know. Let's take a look at. I'm tilting my head sideways, even though it's not going to change anything. I'm trying to look at Drew's graveyard. I don't believe there was a second Kiora, or maybe there is. Right, because he Thoughtseize the first Kiora and then killed the second one, but there's no second Karn, so I don't think this is lethal.
Oh, this is the old bordered card. I was like, all right, what is this text that looks like this card that looks like it's from like 1993? It's
This is the heinous looking Karn.
Yeah, most definitely not from 1993. I'll tell you that. This card has caused me so much grief at like a certain phase of my life. Like I will say this, like, wistfully, I'm actually glad this card got printed, because like it really did change the texture of Magic in general, like all Eternal formats. So, you know, Karn here, the name of the deck, it's not the name of the deck, but like probably one of the most important cards in this deck particularly. And we're gonna see what happens here. I suppose Drew is trying to see if you know they could finish the game this turn. But otherwise, there's always the backup plan of just like, hey, get rid of the boat, get rid of the ship.
Yeah, I'm going to look at Drew's sideboard real quick. I don't think we have a way towards lethal here. So Cauldron is not enough. So the way that it works is the Cauldron loop involves 2 Karns, 2 Kioras, and 14 Devotion, and you can loop that infinitely to gain infinite life, but there's no second Karn in this situation, so that doesn't work. We can get, looks like, a statue, a ship, Nexus, but we have no way to kill the Nexus. Chained Veil doesn't really do that much because, I mean, I guess you could Chain Veil and then use it again. So yeah, we're just going to go with Statue and try and do some, basically just like a little setup here, because he knows he can't kill him.
All right. Attacks coming in now.
But if Harrison does have a way to put Parhelion into the graveyard, that is a lethal attack, so. Oh no, because the Karn's in play. Never mind, the Karn's in play. Oh wait, though, we have the Skysovereign, so I wonder, if you don't block here, you go to 1, and then say you Greasefang back the Skysovereign, or we're trading with the Angels. Okay. So I guess the plan is Greasefang back the Skysovereign, kill the Karn, crew attack, kill a Llanowar Elf, maybe?
Yeah, I'm just gonna speed up the process there. I think I saw a copy of Abrupt Decay in Drew's hand.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's awkward.
For sure.
Before we
go
go to
combat, here's the pause.
All right, there's the Abrupt Decay. I did not catch that last card.
It's a good one.
This is going to make it a lot harder. This is going to make that a lot harder. Yeah, there's also, as Ross points out, the Cav is also back to block. Like, you can kill the Karn with the Skysovereign trigger, but it's not attacking into the Cavaliers.
This is one of those things where I'm gonna assume there's there's definitely a keyword. It's reach. Yes, this Cavalier definitely does have reach. So there's like, this is one of those games, and this is like an important like theory thing. It's like you're in a position where it's your game to lose, and so you just want to make sure that you have all your bases covered. And so I do like, not going for an overly aggressive attack. Also, it may have been Summoning Sink. I don't. This is we're kind of in that point where there's so many permanents in play that I have personally lost track. And while it is my job to know it's on track, I told you I brought a cheat sheet, and that's Devin. So Devin doing a great job here. We're gonna see Mono Green Devotion take the first match here. I'll double check and see if we have a backup. But yeah, very, very powerful stuff here. I mean, 2 ships pseudo passing in the night here, and then games 2 and 3 we saw bits of interaction here and there. Honestly, that's why I asked you about consistency, because like we saw in game 2 where Harrison wasn't really able to get anything really going, and a pair of old growth trolls really came in. Whereas game 1, even in game 1, it was kind of a struggle. It helped that The mono green hand didn't really have too much after the Thoughtseize took away the Storm of the Festival. In game 3, we just saw. So powerful stuff here. Powerful stuff here. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, game one was pretty much just the mono green player kept a hand that was one payoff, got a Thoughtseize, didn't really find a second payoff. And game three, from the Greasefang side of things, found the Greasefang maybe just one turn too late. I think if that Greasefang came up the top of the deck one turn earlier, that probably would have been a win for Greasefang. So yeah, just a game of inches, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like we're on the same wavelength there. Just like one turn, one draw step. It was very close here. Good news, everyone. Though, it looks like we do have. Would you say backup? Okay, the backup is ready, and okay, so
Oh.
as an update, we are going into game 2 for the backup match now, and there was unfortunately a game loss issue, just deck registration errors that happens. We also have the season 2 leaderboard updated, so we're definitely going to take a look at that at some point as well, coming up soon, based on today's modern finale. But yeah, let's get into the backup match here. I do believe we have Ash Johnson playing Is It Phoenix in game 2 against George Jabbour. Now, this is a name that I have heard, and if you've heard it too, probably because George Jabbour top 8'd the modern event yesterday with Narset Parter of Veils and Days Undoing. And I think if you know George Jabbour, I mean, I've caught wind on Twitter, but basically those are the pet cards. Narset in every format, Days Undoing in every format, Pioneer not the exception.
So nice, we did it twice.
Hey, I mean, that would be pretty sweet, right? Yeah, just like, stapling your name on there with this archetype. I think it's awesome. The first time I ever got to see this deck, the Azorius control deck, I put it in air quotes, but was like a variation in modern. I think this is what George was playing with, like chalices and the like. This is definitely not going to be the same deck because of your different format. But talk to me about this matchup. Key cards in both players' decks in game 1.
Well, George Jabbour is playing a deck that has 4 copies of Narset of the Veil, and Ashwin Johnson is a deck that is playing 4 Treasure Cruise, 4 Opt, and 4 Consider. So Narset, definitely one of the most backbreaking cards, and I think it's there was a period of time, a couple of maybe like maybe a month or a month and a half ago, maybe a couple of months at this point, where Is It Control with Narset was like kind of the talk of the town, and it really just the addition of 4 Narsets kind of pushed Phoenix out of the metagame. But we haven't seen a lot of Narsets as of late. So, the Phoenix players think they're safe, and then they queue into George with 4 Narsets and,
yeah,
kind of
I was
some
gonna
rough
say, like,
sledding.
this is like the nightmare pairing, I guess. But, turn 3 here, maybe going to pass the turn. Okay, upkeep, we've got pieces. And
Yeah, pieces is a cantrip that you're allowed to cast through Narset, so that is pretty good. So it looks like we're milling some stuff over here. That's a Temporal Trespass. So that is the Time Walk with Delve. We're not going to take that, though. We're going to go for a chart and what was that? Another pieces, I think? Yeah, chart pieces. Okay. No Phoenixes in the graveyard to speak of. So that's something to keep in mind. So one, maybe a common play pattern is like, maybe George runs out a Narset, maybe down ticks it. If there's a Phoenix in the graveyard, he's got to worry about, even if Ashlyn, kind of quote unquote spews a couple of cantrips into the Narset just to get the Phoenix back, as long as you've answered the Narset, that's, an exchange that you're fine with because you've got the Narset off the battlefield.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think getting the Narset off the battlefield here is just the most important thing. And honestly, this turn 3 was kind of, I would call in this matchup, right, turn 3 as the critical turn. And the critical turn concept is just like what turn you need to really brace your interaction for. Like, let's say, like in the last match, a great example, right? Turn 3 against Greasefang is the critical turn because you want to make sure that, you have an answer for the Greasefang before it gets played and before it brings back one of the vehicles, right? In this situation, I think the same thing sort of applies as well, where Narset is this deck's sort of Greasefang, that making turn 3 the critical turn where you want to hold up your spell pierces, where you want to hold up your interaction, and it goes both ways. George, understanding that Narset being incredible here means that we could probably surmise there is no spell pierce in Ash's hand.
Yeah, I want to take a look at the deck list here to see how many spell pierces we're working with. 2 main deck and then a 3rd in the sideboard. But this is no sideboard, right? With the game loss, I believe it's no sideboard.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just 2 spell pierces, which is very unfortunate for Ashlyn because she didn't get to take out the all the fiery impulses and lightning axes. So kind of a rough spot to be in.
Right, that one doesn't seem like a very those don't seem very good in this matchup, I'll be
No,
honest.
not great.
Yeah. Also
One
doesn't
card,
seem Go ahead.
Go ahead. We both said go ahead. One card
Jinx.
from Dominaria United that that probably will make a huge impact, especially against the Narset, is Fires of Victory, I think it's called. That's the
just
2
about to ask
mana.
you, yeah.
So it's 2 mana. I believe it's kicker, 1 in a blue. So 1 in a red instant, kicker, 2 in a blue. If it's kick, draw a card, and then it deals damage to a creature or planeswalker equal to the number of cards in your hand. So just essentially a 2 mana way to answer Narset.
Okay, so this looks like Wandering Emperor coming into play on the end step.
Okay, I saw it. Did we try to cast a lightning axe? What happened there?
So I wouldn't be surprised if Wandering Emperor comes into play and is going to make a samurai, and maybe we're trying to get rid of
Shortcut
the
a little bit.
samurai.
Yeah, that's likely what happened.
Okay, we'll figure it out. The players will get cards into play very soon here, but this is pretty terrifying now. I feel like George has maybe full control over the game. Just Narset in play, locking down all the cantrips and interaction, and then finally a threat, an instant speed threat. The Wandering Emperor coming out from Neon Dynasty. This card has been very impressive, even sneaking its way into Legacy. Cough, cough. If you are a fan of the Wafo Tapa, you know. And
I watched my fair share of Wafo streams.
And yeah, this card been very impressive and is just all around like if it's playable in Legacy, then it must be really, really good in Pioneer for sure. And you can see here it's slowly taking over the game, really just enabling that draw go strategy that this deck really wants.
Right. And I mean, as we talked about with the Narset, you see how brutal this Narset is. If you look at Ashlyn's hand, it's just, I think, multiple treasure cruises, 3 or 4 cantrips, and there's just not a lot that she can really do in the face of this Narset. You can cast a Consider on your opponent's turn so that you can actually get the draw card, but it's really rough. This Narset is a tough one.
Yeah, this is quite the snowball, honestly. Turn 3 Narset, turn 4 Wandering Emperor, turn 5 Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Coming back from this is going to require a decent chunk of Miracle, nothing less.
Yeah, I guess we finally found targets for these fire impulses, so we get to at least kill some tokens.
Yeah, I mean,
Plus
honestly,
side.
like extending the game is your best bet here, but the sheer advantage that Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is going to provide over the next few turns is going to be insurmountable. We already know there's one copy at least of Dovin's Veto in George Jabour's hands, so the writing probably on the wall. Ash Johnson, very talented, most notable for playing. Okay, look, if someone ever calls you the Queen of Yawgmoth, or any deck for that matter, that is a title that you hold with a lot of respect. And so, for sure, I think Ash will have the play skill capacity to come out of this situation. It's just a matter of whether the deck was willing to provide the cards. So we'll see. Narset being in play does make it a lot harder.
Yeah, and I believe if you look at Ash's hand, I think she did pick up the copy of Fires of Victory. There's only one copy in the deck list,
Okay.
but she knows about the Dovin's Veto, so you can't really resolve that through the veto, and that's your only answer to Narset, so.
Yeah, that's a really good question too, right? I mean, Fires of Victory right now looks pretty good because, I mean, you haven't played any lands, you've played a couple spells here, you got a lot of cards in hand. What's your target? I mean, there are 3 really good targets here. Maybe Teferi's slowly getting out of reach, but Teferi, Narset, and Wandering Emperor. Would you say that the one loyalty Narset is the go-to despite, the other 2 threats in play?
I would be willing to discard 4 cards in my hand to remove the one loyalty Narset from the battlefield. If that gives you, if that's your answer, it's just impossible to play through. Like Ash's hand is like all of Ash's good cards are treasure cruise, and she needs to set up multiple cantrips in a turn to find phoenixes, and none of that is possible with the Narset.
Yeah, I was talking to Joe in I think the semifinals earlier today, and one concept that came up was just like how you design your deck and your mana base and things like that. And you'll notice here, I mean, this is something that we haven't also talked about, is that Ash just hasn't hit that fourth land for a long time. And I would almost say that one of the reasons why that's the case is because, that Narset has been turning off cantrips that normally would help you, find your mana base, smooth out your curve, things like that. So this Narset really doing like quadruple duty almost.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. The Phoenix deck is typically really low on lands because it has access to so many cantrips. But, in those games where your cantrips are essentially shut off, it's really hard to hit those land drops. Like, you could imagine a situation where if Ashlyn just had, like, a hard cast Phoenix on turn 4 to kill the Narset, this game looks a lot different. But because she just missed her 4th land drop to cast the Phoenix, it was just, it's just all downhill from there, essentially.
Yes. Absolutely. So, I mean, we'll see what happens here. Let's talk about endgame conditions for George, though. I mean, at this point, like, what are you looking for George? Because you're definitely in a very strong situation. And if I were, ahead on board, ahead on cards, and ahead on mana, I want to close the game as fast as possible. What's the best way?
Well, isn't the rule with Jace the Mind Sculptor you're always supposed to zero it even when your opponent has no cards in hand?
Yeah, even if you have no cards in your deck, also, yes.
No, but seriously, yeah. I mean, George just has a couple of knights can do the job. George can kind of win the game at his leisure, just clean up with some leftovers. The Teferi might eventually ultimate. Yeah, those are pretty much, I guess, the main win conditions is the 2/2s and the Teferi Hero of Dominaria ultimate.
This is a sweet play. So we know that Dovin's Veto is face up, right? So casting the Fires of Victory into a known Dovin's Veto, not a great idea. But what if you Galvanic iterate the Fires of Victory first to create another copy of it, and instead George says, hey, have all these neither copy resolved, and now things are getting a little bit scary. Yes, well,
yeah,
way scary, because now you're one answer, because there's a one of in the deck that's gone now. So what's the plan now?
Right. Well, maybe hard cast I thought there was a Phoenix in Ash's hand. I can't remember. I want to say, I mean, that's probably your only, you got to try something, right? I mean, yeah. I guess you could try to maybe cast a Temporal Trespass, but that's really, like, what are you doing with your extra turn at this point? So yeah, you kind of just have to cast the Phoenix, maybe hope that it works out, hope that you can try to get this Narset.
And it looks like that angle is also covered. I see another copy of Wandering Emperor in the hand there for George Jabeur, but it looks like we're going to march the Arclight Phoenix straight into the exile zone, and that might just seal the deal actually fully. No reason not to complete the game to every degree possible. Make them have it.
Yeah, but I mean, this Narset that was played on turn 3, what turn is it now? Turn 12? And yeah, never left the battlefield. And it's just unfortunate because Ash just doesn't have a ton of answers to Narset, like we talked about. Only the one Fires of Victory. Had Phoenix, but just never really, did not have the 4th land drop to be able to cast it. So just, unfortunate series of events for Ash there.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, game loss in the first game, so we don't have any sideboarded games to watch. But generally speaking, like, even evaluating sideboarded games, who would you say is ahead, the Phoenix side or the Azorius side?
It's tough because the sideboard, like, if we take a look at Ash's sideboard, the sideboard definitely does make it quite a bit better. We got some Young Pyromancers, Mystical Disputes, Spell Pierces to help fight over the Narset. So more interest in Narset plus additional threats with Young Pyromancer. So I think it maybe gets slightly better for Phoenix post-board, but it's still maybe an uphill battle. So just against the 4 Narsets.
Yeah. Why don't we also take a look at George Jabeur's deck too? Because we didn't get a chance to actually see the full thing here, and I always get excited. I mean, I'm just asking, one Narset plus Days Undoing fan to another, what the deck looks like, and this looks like a pretty, now that I think about it, kind of a stock Azorius control list. 4 copies of Censor, a load of Planeswalkers, good removal in the form of March of Otherworldly Light, counter spells. Okay, so this is fairly solid here. Anything notable in this list for you?
Well, specifically for the Phoenix side of things, the Rest in Pieces would have been great. Stroke Gust, not really too much. Maybe the Settle the Wreckage. There's another card that we could talk about. Dominator United, Temporary Lockdown. A card that we haven't seen a ton of here, but just overall, I think that card is an incredibly powerful tool to have for Azorius control decks to have access to. There's just so many matchups, like against Mono White Humans, against Boros Heroic, that just have a plethora of 1-mana permanents, and just being able to, 3 mana, get rid of all of them, exile, which is pretty important. So yeah, that card is a massive boon for these control decks.
Yeah, Temporary Lockdown is a card that I originally read, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it's not for me in Legacy. Maybe it's not for me in Modern, but in Pioneer, this is the format where, because think about it, right? Like, they don't make 3-mana sweepers, especially in white, ever often. Honestly, whenever I think of like a 3-mana sweeper, I think of like Anger of the Gods, I think of like Volcanic Fallout. But something like that card, Temporary Lockdown, very, very interesting. And honestly, it does fill up one of the holes for this deck, because I think one of the ways that you lose with Azorius Control is just if you just get like run over a bit too fast, a bit too early, right? Like a very, very hyper aggressive curve. And Temporary Lockdown, 3 mana is exactly what you're looking for. And it doesn't take any like, you don't need to splash a color for it or anything crazy like that. So
Right.
looks like we are now going to time in the round here. So I wanted to take a look at some of the infographics that we've got updated now with the results from our modern events. Let's go ahead and take a look at the leaderboard here for season 2 to see who is in contention for some of the slots, the at-large slots that we have feeding into the championship. And you can see here the season 2 leaderboard updated. First seed, Jesse Robkin, no surprise, with a crushing success of powerful performances over the season. Connor Mullally, Max Komanowski, these two players in orange because they are already locked for the end of year championship event. And then following up, you have Scott Polaire at 63 points. And so I do believe there will be 2 at-large slots from season 2, the leaderboard. We also have a year-long leaderboard, which I'm not really sure if that one's updated, but if it is, we will get that on the screen as well. But Jesse Robkin, Scott Polaire in contention. Zach Dubin also really, really close, a couple points behind here. So this event could switch who we see at the end of the year, event. And
George
I am pretty
as well,
excited.
who we just saw on camera.
Close reviews. All right. In that case, why don't we cut to a quick break? We'll be back in just a little bit here. And then once we're back, we'll talk about some of the upcoming events here at the NRG series for season 3 and onwards, and what you can expect. Don't go anywhere. Grab your popcorn. We'll be right back.